Hello, and welcome to Find Your Freedom, a podcast dedicated to helping you truly find freedom in all aspects of life. Join your hosts and their expert guests as they share practical tips and strategies for finding more freedom in your life. It's time to take control of your life and create the future you want. Let's find your freedom. Here are your hosts, Lenny the Boss and Omid Rad Investor.
Boom, 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 boom. We are back for another fantastic episode of Find Your Freedom. And before we bring on our next guest, you know that we always got to help you out. So we put together a freedom kit for you. It's absolutely free. All you have to do is go to www.findyourfreedom.com/freedom kit. That's right. www.findyourfreedom.com/freedom kit. Easily downloadable, absolutely free. Now, our next guest is a really cool dude, man. He helped military veterans and business owners create passive income through real estate. Man, we're going to jump right into it. Justin, what's up, my brother?
everything. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Hey, Justin, man, before we get into, your story and start to inspire the audience out there, could you guys give us a little background on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a kid that grew up in Baltimore and joined the Navy right out of high school. So like a lot of people, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Didn't get a whole lot of guidance on what I should do. So I did the route of, what can I do to kind of travel and see the world? And the Navy made the most sense for me. So in saying that, I was actually one of the fortunate ones. So I joined and ended up going to an aircraft carrier in Virginia and got home port change from Virginia all the way to Yokosuka, Japan. So got to see a lot of the world from Brazil to Chile to Australia to Hong Kong. So really, really fortunate in that respect. And then got out and said, hey, I want to do more. So got out, went to school in Florida, got my master's degree, and thought, hey, all right, now it's time to kind of build my life. I already had a family going. So I was like, let me try getting into investing. So like a lot of people, started in the stock market and quickly realized I'm not Warren Buffett. I can't analyze a company. I can't tell you anything about an executive management team. So what came next? Real estate. And it's kind of the rest is history. So I've been doing that for quite a while now.
Wow. So, I mean, looks like you've had quite a bit of experience in a very short amount of time. As far as like, I feel like you travel and it just expedites learning all sorts of things from all different perspectives. So, being in the Navy, there's a lot of people that let's say they finish their time and then they don't necessarily transition into school. So, what inspired you kind of like begin that process? Because it looks like you went to school and you got a master's, and statistically maybe that's not as common. So, like, what kind of led you that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I kind of thought the traditional route of formal education was the way to go. And listen, I joined the military because I am not an academic, right? I just, it made sense to me to do it. It kind of gave me opportunities that I love, and that's why I love America and this country. But I thought to be successful out of the military, I needed to go to school. And the irony is, after getting my undergraduate in economics and getting a master's in financial and economics and economics and finance, I ultimately did YouTube training to learn real estate. So I didn't take a single real estate class throughout any of my education. Now, fortunately for me, it was all paid for, right? So that was a win. So I didn't spend a couple hundred, $1,000 on my education, right? I may have paid it through the service, but it didn't come out of my pocket. So and I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? I think a lot of military guys, especially, have some really, really strong skill sets, and it doesn't always fit into the corporate world. And I think I'm one of those guys. It never felt right. I had some corporate jobs, but entrepreneurship definitely inspired me, and that's a part of my business now, really helping veterans out to kind of figure out their way, right? And within the real estate space.
That's great, man. That's great. That's awesome. So, let's walk to your journey a little bit. So, you said that you were born and raised in Baltimore, right?
Yep.
Joined the Navy, got to see, the world, right? And then you went to school. So, how did you end up in Florida?
So Florida is a really long story, but if I boil it down, so my previous relationship, my first two children, is from Florida. So she ended up down here, so that's where I ended up as well. So and fell in love with it. So even though I'm from Baltimore, I'm officially a South Florida guy. I absolutely love it. So I'm here in Jupiter, the top part of Palm Beach County, and then now I met my now wife here as well, and yeah, like it's just Florida's just where I want to be, and I just love it here. So, and my family's all based down here as well. So,
So, but I don't want to get off topic, but so I mean, is it a requirement, like if you're from South Florida, that you have to have a six pack? Because I mean, I see your videos, and like you're like doing like CrossFit type exercises. You're like lifting more weight than anybody can do in a lifetime. And like for the viewers who are just listening to the podcast, they can't see, but even like through your shirt, it's like muscular, like but lean, right? Like, so is that a requirement, or is that just a military thing, or how have you incorporated that just in your lifestyle, like just over time?
yeah, absolutely. Well, number one, I want to keep my wife. I love her very much, so I got to keep her happy. That's number one.
Yeah.
And hey, man, it's sunny all the time out here. It's like you want to feel good, you want to look good, and the reality is, all joking aside, like for me, especially I think from the military, I really cultivated kind of a strong mindset and discipline, and a part of that is taking care of myself, right? Like I have four kids, and um, you know, kids are a lot of work and a lot of energy, and a part of kind of my morning routine is waking up and doing my journaling, but also working out for that hour and a half, 2 hours, just so I can make sure that I can give all myself to the business, but also have energy at the end of the day to spend time with my kids and my wife. So for me, like that's the most important thing. That's the driving force. So it's just kind of a byproduct of trying to do things to better my life and make it easier for me to be successful.
There you go, and that makes a whole bunch of sense. So, all right, so let's talk through this journey. All right, so
Yeah,
we're out the Navy, we're in Florida, right? You decide to go ahead get the education, and you decide to hit the corporate world.
yeah.
I know you mentioned that it wasn't for you, but what are some of the things that you went through that really said, "I can't do this"?
Yeah. Yeah. So the corporate ladder game, the idea of somebody else controlling your destiny, it was really, really important for me, especially as I got out of the military. And, I think it's a little bit of a misconception. A lot of times people think of military just guys to just follow orders. But, realistically, especially when you're trying to get a job done, and you have to be creative and think out of the box sometimes, right? And sometimes in corporate environments, depending on what kind of corporate environment you're in, that's frowned upon, right? And not only is it frowned upon, you have somebody controlling your destiny, right? So if you're not playing, office politics, or you don't get along with your boss, or maybe your boss's boss, potentially that could limit your growth. And I never wanted to limit my growth in regards to the amount of money I can make, the amount of time I have to spend with my family, and the things I can do in life. So entrepreneurship always was appealing, but it wasn't until you really get in that environment that it made sense. Well, okay, if I really want to do something special that my kids are proud of me of, I have to kind of go on this journey. And that's not to say, you can't do that in the corporate side, but for me and my personality, it just made more sense to go that entrepreneurial route.
Yeah, and so I like that. I think for me, there's limitations. I worked a corporate job for 18 years, and just like you said, there's limitations to a degree. And if you rub the wrong person the wrong way, and they're the one that has the decision making power, you kind of hit the ceiling. So entrepreneurship, I think, is for somebody that hustles hard. I mean, looking at you, you have four kids, and you look
Or
like that. I mean, I don't know how many people have four kids and look like you. So, I mean, I can already tell that you hustle hard. So, I mean, that's
absolutely,
great. So,
absolutely. It's getting them at
yeah. So
4:30 every day, no matter what, weekends, weekdays. I mean, you
that's
gotta you gotta
oh, that's
figure
the
it out. You gotta
best.
find time.
Yep. I agree with you. You gotta make time. So you're okay. So you did the corporate jobs. So let's say you worked a job, and then what made you decide to do the masters? And then is it more like just upside, or like the access to the education because of the military programs, or what, I guess, talk a little bit about that.
I'm gonna be honest with you. It was my wife. So my only way into the UK was through
Oh yeah.
a education visa. And so that is
No
what ultimately
way.
drove me to do it. Yeah, yeah. So super cool story. I met my wife. She's actually English, so she was over here at the same, working for the same company. So a part of kind of that corporate structure is that they'll send you overseas for a couple of years, right? Anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and as long as you don't completely crap the bed, like you'll come
Yeah.
back and get promoted to a much higher position. So it was great. So we met each other and like immediately, like we clicked. Like it was one of those storybook TV. Like I knew I wanted to marry her from the first time I met her. So then when her time kind of came to an end, I had a choice. It's, kind of say, all right, bye. I'm not going to go to England, or I can, fast forward my acceleration in entrepreneurship and quit my job and say, hey, let me go back to school. So that's what I did. So I went and got a education visa to get my master's in England, and that's how I ended up over there. So I did 2 years in the UK. It's pretty cool.
Oh man, that's very cool. Listen to you,
Yeah.
all the cool stories, Mr. Romantic over here. That's like dude. Listen, you got the fantasy. Like all right, even after he's our editor. Listen, we got to edit this out because we gonna shoot a movie about this, and we're casting Justin for this shit because
There you go.
he got it down pat, right? But all seriousness, that's great, man. We love to hear that, and happy that's going on. All right, so man, all right, so let's see where we at in the journey. So right now, right, you're at the corporate office and you're dealing with those politics, and you like,
Yeah.
look, I need to be in control of my growth, right?
Yep.
So real estate was that thing. So like, did you go out get a mentor? Did you read some books, podcasts? Did you have a friend? Like, what was your entry point?
Yeah.
Did you just jump in? you know,
Yeah, yeah.
with
So, I mean, it's a little bit of both. So, I'm an action guy, 100%, right? I think to be successful in life, a lot of people suffer from analysis paralysis. I might not be smart enough to suffer from that. So, I don't think I ever had an issue in that respect. I like to do. So, when I kind of put my mind on it, it's just how can I do it? And then I went down to kind of the YouTube education. I think one of the greatest things in the history of the world is YouTube. You can literally learn how to do anything and everything. And that drew me to ultimately to Rod Khleif. So my real estate journey started in the multifamily space. And actually, I think that's where we met, Lenny, in one of his, I think it was boot camps or one of
yes, that's
those.
correct.
Yeah, yeah. So that's when we
Yep.
kind of got our education and met together and stuff. And then through that, really love the multifamily. Think it's an awesome asset class, but I really selfishly wanted more control, right? So multifamily syndications. There's a lot of players, even though it's such a great asset class. I started thinking about, well, how can I have much more ownership over the properties that I was going to purchase? So, and I didn't have a couple $1,000,000 burning my hole in my pocket, so I said, well, let me start looking at single family. And then from single family, it's like, well, how can I actually get more return out of these? And I said, okay, let's try a short-term rental. And it was almost kind of right place, right time. So I started buying properties, 2018, back in South Florida. So I started to build my portfolio up, buying in West Palm Beach, buying some condos on Palm Beach Island, Fort Lauderdale. And I put them on the short-term rental market, and it popped. And I realized like, oh, okay, this is where I can actually make some real money. And that's kind of where the epiphany aha moment, just kind of by happenstance, or taking action and just you're also doing some self-study.
Yeah, I think the timing of that was like amazing, right? Because that's short-term rentals kind of blew up right around like that, COVID transition, and then investors started jumping in. And if you were in there just at the earlier stages, I mean, you're killing it on the equity side as well as the cash flow side, as well as securing those interest rates at the 3%, 2 to 4%. So it's like an amazing time. So like, so you're doing the short-term rentals, and so like explain to maybe the audience like, why short-term rentals versus like any other asset class as far as a place to maybe like build wealth or build a portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. I think short-term rentals just fit my personality. I it's still very much an operator. And as you guys know, like short-term rental space, I mean, it's a whole business, right? It's not buy a house or even buy an apartment complex, put some long-term tenants in, and kind of, it's kind of business as usual, right? And obviously there are other things that go into place, but you really have to be on your game. And I think in the short-term rental space, I always tell people all the time, like the short-term rental space is the wild, wild west. We are still very much in the infancy of, the potential of this kind of space in this asset class. It has not been institutionalized. I think the majority, if the statistics are correct, about 90% of operators own less than, I think, like 5 properties. It may even be less than that. So you're talking about people that casually do this game in this business. And I look at it as a game, like where are the inefficiencies? And I saw that there are some inefficiencies in that space. And I think that, when you can kind of find that and look at it from much more of a macro perspective, you can say, all right, well, how can I take advantage of this? And it's just kind of market strategy, almost like game theory. Like, how can I figure out how, if I can do something better than my competitors, then I can really start making some real money.
Gotcha. Yeah, I really like that you said short-term rentals fit your personality because a lot of people, don't know that. And then you followed up and said it's a business. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think that it's kind of like a long-term rental play, kind of like a set it and forget it type of deal. And it's really not. It's a hospitality play where you're constantly showing up to ensure that your guests are having the best experience. All right, so you're right now saying, man, short term rentals is the way to go. You came in during a good time, like Omid mentioned, with their interest rates and all that good stuff. So, um, like what? Two questions. What type of properties, are you buying? And then the second question is this something that you're doing with your wife, or is this something kind of like your wife does her thing and you do yours?
Yeah, so let me answer the first question, or the second question first. So, this is a family business. So that's kind of how I look at it, right? So it's funny. So my shirt says it's a part of my company, Leicestermore Capital, which that is an amalgamation of where my wife is from in England, called Leicestershire, and where I'm from, Baltimore. We kind of put it together. So no one can ever pronounce it, but I also don't ever have to worry about anyone infringing on my trademark or name or anything like that. So I don't know if it's beneficial or not, but at least I have that going for me, right? So when I first got into the business, I think it is so incredibly important to have your partner on board. I think if they do not see your vision or at least be supportive of it, I think it makes it really, really hard to succeed in the future. And I had the best of both, right? And again, I go back to how we first met. Like I knew that she was the one for me because she's always been my biggest cheerleader, and she sees my vision and helps me kind of achieve those goals. So when we first started buying properties, particularly some of the condos and stuff on Palm Beach Island, I called her my VP of decor because I like doing the underwriting, finding the property, getting debt on it. I couldn't stand trying to decorate these guys. Like, so she would come in and she would find the furniture and the pictures and all that kind of stuff. And she played such a crucial role in getting those first couple properties up and going. And she still does. And, like most guys, I wasn't listening to her, and I didn't build up a social media following when she was telling me to do that back in 2018, because she has a phenomenal coaching business herself. But we can't all be perfect, right? So the next piece is kind of what properties do I buy? So I really like small condos. I like multifamily, residential multifamily. So obviously, anything under 5 units. I just think you get a lot more bang for your buck, and you almost treat it like, multifamily when you can kind of operate all under one under one loan, a couple different units. But I think how I kind of differentiated myself from some of the other players, because, if you looked at, let's call it, institutional level guys, the Saunders and the Wanders, they're going out and buying, high end, best real estate, all the bells and whistles. And in my mind, you guys can have that. Like, I like kind of, in between, kind of mid tier. I'm going to give you some nice amenities, but really, I want to cultivate relationships with hospitals and traveling nurses that need a couple of days or maybe a week or two to stay. Blue collar workers, insurance brokers, and then I infill with vacationers, particularly in Florida. So my strategy has been very different, but I think that we're going to be much more resilient in more recessionary times. And I like to do things that, make sure that I'm protecting my downside as much as I'm trying to maximize my returns.
I think that's really cool about the Florida market, like different Florida markets. You can kind of have a blend of both as far as like short term. And then midterm has become like this, like a really sexy thing over the past, I don't know, year or so. Maybe you can kind of speak on that as far as like what your experience has been kind of, be able to kind of blend like both, even within your portfolio and like even like how you treat them. Like, is there like are they different in terms of like their needs and kind of walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you almost have to look market to market. You kind of have a slightly different strategy. Just to kind of speak to, and I know your listeners may not be as familiar with some of the areas down in South Florida, but somewhere like Palm Beach Island, right? So I bought a bunch of condos there, and it's where not too far from Mar-a-Lago, so Trump's compound. And if you know anything about kind of the island, there are a lot of hotels there, and number one, there aren't a lot of short-term rentals there, right? So the hotels can go anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 a night. So if you are able to buy a property that you can get, for a couple $100,000, but you're able to charge anywhere from 250, 350, 450, that's still a steal relative to the alternative on the island, right? So that is going to be a much more vacation focus versus what I have in kind of West Palm Beach, where a lot of people think that Florida is really kind of seasonal, and in some places it's not, right? So you have your snowbirds, your people that come down for vacation, but we kind of look at some of those properties that, like, how can we cater to events like baseball tournaments and things like that. We always try to plug in with what's going on in the area, and we can build relationships with different, whether vendors or, like I said, hospitals before, and say, hey, we're here if you guys need any space available. So your strategy is always going to be tweaked a little bit based on where the property is, but you need to just understand your market, and that becomes a kind of crucial piece.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I love it. So, we hear that you're revving up. So, are you kind of you and your wife doing this alone, or y'all guys got like partnerships? Guess like how you guys getting the properties?
Yeah. So initially we were doing a loan, right? I go back to that selfishness. I was like, I want to own all this stuff, 100%, but then you quickly realize, like, and you run out of money, right? So your equity is great. You're a millionaire, but you don't have a whole lot of disposable income extra to buy more property. So, my business had to take that next step. So it then became, how can I cultivate relationships with really strong operators and to get a fund? So for me, it's almost like a syndication. It's rather, we want to kind of raise capital so we can go out and buy a bunch of properties. And today's environment, it becomes, more crucial, in my opinion, than ever before, right? Because there's so much uncertainty. So having that ability to raise capital, then potentially buy properties all cash, and then you can kind of cultivate your relationship with your debt partners, and then you can generally get a little bit more favorable terms too when you kind of go that way. So started off as kind of family, still family business, but we've had to, in order to scale, partner with some other folks to really start kind of capitalizing on the market.
So as you like partner with people, let's say there's maybe you're trying to hit certain returns. Does your buy box change in terms of now at this point you're kind of you know sharing resources and maybe having to have certain type of returns, or you're kind of still targeting the same type of markets based on like the previous success that you've had?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a little bit of both. So we're still pursuing properties in the same markets, but the buy box has tweaked, obviously with interest rates, obviously with just, especially in Florida, right? There's so much appreciation that, that same property, like I said, I bought for 250, is now worth 650, right? Or, 450. It's either double or sometimes triple depending on the area that's in. So that has kind of led me to look in different markets and maybe go to some areas that weren't on our radar before, but to hit that kind of return profile that we need to hit, we've had to kind of venture out. But we've also, kind of with our LP partners, we had to kind of get a almost come to Jesus moment and say, hey, like, the returns aren't going to be the same as they were a year ago. I mean, even 6 months ago, right? Like, we need to kind of recalibrate and say, these are the kind of times we're in, but it's still a solid return.
Gotcha. So, when I think about it and just the average person, they always really have the same story like you. Hey, they can go out, buy a property or two, and then they'll start to look to scale and they look and say, man, we don't have, enough cash. We used all of our, economic resources on this. So, from a partnership perspective, you know, I guess how did you guys kind of, and this is for the listeners, how did you go about structuring some of those deals? Because a lot of people don't really know, what you can do. I get that question a lot. Like, okay, if I get a partner, like, who's supposed to get paid for what? How much I supposed to get paid? And, how much I give back to them? And, and if something go wrong, what happens? So can you talk on that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, first things first, I think everyone always needs to look at kind of what value can you bring to the table, right? So, your partnership's going to be built off of, obviously skill set, track record, things of that nature. So, if you're talking about someone that's first getting into it, figure out how you can bring value to a table. Because it may not, like you said, it may not be the capital piece, but like you may have the hustle piece. You may be willing to go and search for properties. And to speak to kind of what is it like? What kind of partner should you go after? I only can speak personally, right? I will only partner with people that my kind of thinking ideology is aligned. I feel like that person has high integrity. I generally partner with a lot of veterans, guys that I know are going to work hard. I see that are active, right? There's certain things that for me, I like to see that kind of gives me the green light and say, okay, this person gets it. And even when times get hard, they're still going to try. They're going to show up and figure it out, right? So I always tell people, be very cautious of the people that you partner with because it's a marriage, effectively. It's especially depending on how long you're going to stay in the deal. So make sure that you guys first communicate and always have real conversations on like what you want this partnership to look like and how long. If it's you're in it for a long time, that what that exit's going to look like, right? Because like everything can line up, but if you're a buy and hold guy like I am, but your partner wants to sell anytime there's kind of a market uptick, that might be problematic in the future. So make sure you're communicating and you're finding somebody that is aligned with kind of your vision and your values.
I like that piece of like understanding the exit strategy because I think people get into it and they're like, yeah, we're gonna kill it, we're gonna make some money,
Yeah.
and then maybe they don't really have it planned out as far as okay, what is so when is this gonna be over, and or like one person wants to like stay and one person wants to go, and so I think that's kind of cool how you're able to kind of set parameters around, hey, this is what it looks like, this is the goals, are we online, are we on the same page, yes, do we have the right value? So yeah, that sounds great.
And I would
Um,
even say that for the LP investors. So for your listeners out there that may be, syndicators or raising capital, like, having those real conversations with your investors, even if you're just doing a partnership with someone and saying, hey, if you're putting your money up, we're going to be in this for five, potentially, you might put in 1 year extensions in your deal. We could be in bed together for 7 years, right? So, you can't have the expectations like maybe in 3-4 years, I'm going to get my initial principal back. So you have those hard conversations up front, so you won't have issues down the road.
no, that's great. No, that's great. So I guess just kind of switching it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get into the real estate space, but then they struggle with getting their partner on board. And I know you kind of talked about how you found like the perfect person as far as like aligning values. But what would you say to somebody who's trying to get their partner on board and they're struggling with that? Like, what are some ways that maybe they can help facilitate that or kind of bridge the gap so it'll they can kind of bring them along.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish I had the secret sauce. I don't know, but what I can say is that I think if your partner and yourself are constantly trying to grow, you will generally grow together. I think what happens a lot of times if one partner is really really revved up and like, hey, I want to do all this, and the other one isn't in that mindset, I think there can be some friction. And I think something that could help out is maybe introduce your partner to somebody. If your game is real estate, someone that's in the real estate space that speaks that partner's language, right? And make sure that it feels more real. Because I think a lot of times people get in, really have some limiting beliefs on what they think is possible. And that might be kind of the roadblock of like, they just see you as someone that has a pipe dream versus like someone that actually has a blueprint that can kind of figure it out along the way. So, like I said, I've been really fortunate with my wife, and she's been phenomenal. She's in that space and she gets it. But we weren't always on the same page. And I think when you kind of communicate and you kind of talk to each other and say, hey, look, and I'll even throw out something that I've never said before, but, there was friction in our relationship. My wife was like, I have a vision of this life that I want to have. And she effectively told me, you can either get on board or get the hell out. And I was like, okay, yeah, all right, let's do this. Let's do this together, right? And sometimes you need that kick in the butt, right?
Yes.
And ultimately, but that drove me and to really think bigger, right? And it wasn't that I was thinking small per se, but I wasn't thinking big enough. And sometimes you need that kick. Now, what that kick looks like from partner to partner can be very different. For me, I like the stone cold truth. I'm just that kind of guy. Like, tell me how it is, and I'll figure it out. But yeah, I would say you know your partner, introduce them to some literature that resonates with them, and help them get on board, and make sure you're always trying to grow.
No, I love those tips. I really do enjoy the tip where you say, hey, a friend or someone who can kind of speak the language, to kind of get them on board. So that's great. And I also love, what you said, because I think the listeners really got to take that end of understanding that it's a partnership, and, from your spouse is what I'm saying, right? And you sometimes have to have tough conversations, and the tough conversations is not always going to be, peaches and cream or rainbows. But there's going to be those conversations that's going to be able to allow you to do a transformation, to check yourself, to realize, like you just mentioned, hey, I was thinking big, but I can actually think bigger. And who's the best person to bring that to your attention but your better half? You know what I mean? And I think that's great. So, with that being said, man, we got a question for you. What does find your freedom mean to you?
Yeah. So find my freedom. Really, what that means to me is being able to spend time with my family, really on my terms. So that's the most important thing for me. Like this is why I'm in this business. Unlike very few other industries that you can actually build a business, one that you would love and enjoy, but also gives you the time freedom to take trips and really be in your kids' lives and be present with your wife. I go to all my kids' jujitsus, their basketball games. I'm really able to kind of build a life on my terms, and that's all thanks to real estate. So, that's what freedom is to me.
No, I think that's great. I see your videos. You're always working out and looking good, and so if like, how else would like somebody else be able to find you?
Yeah, so you can check me out on Instagram. So Justin C Mosley underscore LMC, and LinkedIn is a good one as well. Just like Justin C Mosley, you can find me.
All right, fantastic. Now, listen, man, we normally end the show with this big boom, right? So, look, Justin, you're clearly bigger than both of us, so you got to bring the biggest boom here. Right now for the listeners, this is going to be I'm talking this to existence. It's going to be the biggest boom we have to date. Right, and I don't know, we got like 50 booms in the bag or something like that. So, all right. So, how we gonna do it, fellas? Is I'm gonna count one, two, three, and then all three of us at the same time going to say boom. Y'all ready?
Yep.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. One, two, three.
Boom!
Boom! Awesome, 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 awesome. Listen, man, we just had a fantastic episode with a good friend of mine. We met out Cali, stayed in touch, always staying in touch and just sharing information with one another. And that's what it's about, to make sure that you network and you have those connections, because you just never know. All right. With that being said, man, we have this freedom kit for you. Is free, is easily downloadable. All you have to do is go to www.findyourfreedom.com/freedom kit. That's right. Findyourfreedom.com /freedom kit. Now, one of the things we need you to do is listen to this episode. And when you do, leave an honest 5-star review. This is the way that we can continue to bring episodes just like this one to you. All right. Also, make sure that you subscribe and take this link and share it with everyone. Share it with your aunt, your uncle, your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousin. Share it with everybody that you like at work and share it with the ones that you don't. Until the next episode of Find Your Freedom, talk to you soon. Peace.
Peace.
Thanks for listening to Find Your Freedom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're at it, please help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review and sharing the podcast with friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, get out there and find your freedom.